Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Western Liberty Network, a 501c3 organization, and I want to welcome you to our weekly Zoom training session. There are a couple things I have to go through. First of all, I have to make clear that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization, and for this reason, we do not endorse or oppose any candidate, political party, legislation, or ballot measure. Instead, we train people in the skills they need to be successful in doing grassroots politics. And of course, those who receive the training are free to use the training in any way that they like. We do have guest speakers and people participate, and sometimes they make comments, but the comments are solely the responsibility of those who make them, and they may not necessarily reflect the views of Western Liberty Network. Now, I'm going to share the screen for just a moment. Okay, if you go to the westernlibertynetwork.org website, you will see this webpage. And what you see on the homepage is news, things that are going on. And the session we're training today is at the top right now. If you want to see what Western Liberty Network is doing, all you need to do is scroll down to the various stories and take a look at what interests you. We also have from time to time a link to people who have spoken. You can see the speeches and hear them. There are documents you can download if you're interested, as you like. If you would like to know what our training facilities are, go to the training tab and you'll see this. WLN Academy consists of the training programs that we offer through Western Liberty Network. And the we in Western Liberty Network, incidentally, for people have asked in the past, includes myself, our board of directors, our advisory committee, and the volunteer trainers that we have from time to time that provide this training. We have a variety of different training methods. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see some documents. These are documents, PDF documents you can download. They're meant to be provided with live training, but they can stand on their own. If you scroll down a little further, you will see the recordings of the Saturday training sessions. We do this every Saturday at 1 o'clock on a different topic. Sometimes I provide the training, sometimes we have guests provide the training. And if you scroll down, you see a issue that interests you, just click on it and it will start to play. All of these resources are free of charge. If you'd like to support Western Liberty Network, go to the Support WLN tab and you can make a one-time or a monthly contribution level by clicking on the appropriate button, and they will take your money through PayPal. All contributions to Western Liberty Network are tax deductible. I'd also like to ask or invite each of you to set aside February 4th and 5th on your calendars. February 5th will be our 12th annual Leadership and Activist Training Conference. It will be held at the Hilton Hotel at in Vancouver, Washington. And on the 4th, the night of the 4th at 7 o'clock, we always have a free reception where speakers and activists can meet and intermingle. These are always very successful events. So the training that we're doing today will be up by the end of the day today, in case you want to review the training. None of this is copyrighted, so you can share this with your friends. You can, if you see something that you think a friend of yours would be interested in, feel free to forward it to them. The printed documents that you can download, you can reproduce them for them however you like. So I'm going to stop the share and come back here. And at this point, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Greg Burnett. Greg Burnett is the owner of Burnett Media Group. It's a advertising, media, social media company. He does a lot of different work. He can talk about that if he wants to. He's also president of the board of directors for Western Liberty Network. And he's going to provide training today on managing your reputation online. So with that, I will axe my own video feed and I will turn it over to Greg. Thank you, Greg.
Fantastic. Axe your own video feed. Come on, everybody wants to see you, Rich. Now you're taking your video off so you can go eat or something. I know that's what's going on.
Probably that or more. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I'm going to withhold my tongue on that one.
I just don't want to distract from your star.
Because we're recording this,
charisma.
I'm not going to make any Tubin jokes or anything.
Mhm.
Anyway, Greg Burnett, I would love to have everybody introduce themselves at some point or jump into chat and let me know anything about you as we're going along here. I can multitask. But Burnett Media Group, I spent most of my life down in the Portland area in Oregon, known Rich for a lot of years. Real proud to be president of Western Liberty Network on the board. And recently, you can see that, did my move up to northern Idaho, where my family is from. I'm up here in the land of Hope, Idaho. Out by probably the most beautiful place on the planet. I'll say that now. But I came here grew up coming here summers, and really happy to be here. But I would say at least 25% of my time is down in Oregon, and probably 75% of my business is still there. So we still go back and forth quite often, Oregon and Washington. Anyway, our business is mostly focused on, I'd say it's about 75% commercial and 25% political. In political years, that's flipped, but every 4 years. But for the most part, that's what it is. As far as reputation and online reputation management, both publicly and online, but I guess everything's online today. That's kind of the point. We do a lot of that both commercially and politically. They have some similarities, but they're both handled very differently just because of obvious different treatment of a company versus a person in politics. Today is going to be, as Rich instructed, to make it really, really rudimentary, just the basics. This can get really, really complicated and get really in depth, and there's lots of stories, very recent stories we could talk about, and I might refer to a couple of them, of dealing with this both in political and company reputations. But there are countless numbers that we can talk about how these what you do online is critically important to your business or your political future, and thinking ahead. It's not like when many of us were children, at least people my age, that we didn't have to deal with this growing up. When I was in high school and college, I didn't necessarily have to worry about something I said publicly, other than somebody finding an old printed newspaper. They're not really going to discover much on me as far as some random comment or tweet I made at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was ticked off or said something that I shouldn't have probably said, that I forgot about 20 years later. We've seen this happen in lots of recent things. I mean, go back any single political confirmation hearing, and you'll see this in droves. You'll see this daily in the news. Something somebody said 15, 20 years ago is even coming up now, but regularly 10 years ago. You make a single tweet or a single post on Facebook, a single YouTube video, and taken out of context or even in context can come back to haunt you 10 years later when you potentially are in a completely different place in life, or quite honestly could be a completely different person than you were at that time. Our society no longer accepts the evolution of humans, which we do as people. I am a completely different person now than I was hopefully 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. In fact, I know I am. But the internet makes you that person you were 30 years ago. So knowing all that, and having said all that, I think everybody realizes that today you are immortal online. And that's kind of the point of online reputation. So I wanted to just walk you through a couple slides here and say how it's important to think through these things when you're doing it. And it's different roles for different people. Let's see if I can share a screen here. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Rich, can you give me screen sharing? Are you there, my friend?
Yes, I will give you screen sharing. Let's see.
And I'll jump right in this, and people can, of course, you can chat in there if you interrupt something, or you can jump on and feel free to interrupt me anytime. But if you do, give me a quick little chat window and say if you have a question as we go along. But for the most part, this is gonna be pretty basic, and I'm hoping most of it's just common sense, but it's some just words of advice, if nothing else, from a person who's been through this a lot. Did you get my screen sharing yet?
I think so. Give it a try.
Yes, you did. There it is. Good. Okay. And I just put this together for us today. So this is nothing formal. Forgive the stock art-y kind of look of it, because that's exactly what it is. So this is just quick little notes to remind us when we're talking through it. Reputation matters. The internet's immortal. We talked about this. I think everybody understands this very clearly. You know, once you say something, it lives forever. Just yesterday, we had I guess it'd be 2 days now, day and a half. We have an accidental shooting on a movie set from Alec Baldwin, and within minutes we find a tweet from 2017 where he has a series of tweets essentially, but one talking about exactly what happened with him, criticizing the police for an accidental shooting. What we say 4 years ago in Twitterverse is something that will impact something that happens to me today. So just an example of things happen all the time, and you can find 50 examples of this per day at this point. And pretty much the entire news is driven now by what somebody said in a tweet earlier. So we can't stress especially when I'm talking to candidates more than anything else, what you say today will be held against you. Everything you say lives forever, can be found, it will be found. And will be taken out of context used against you. That's a rule we live by. When I have candidates and we start a campaign, the first thing I do is go back in time and find out everything they've ever said, if possible. We've had exceptions to that very recently, in fact. So what's online? Everything. And when I do opposition research for candidates, we find everything. And there's times where we hire private investigators even to find some of the stuff that's not really findable in public. But just public, you're going to find everything: social media, news, letters to the editor, if you write an op-ed piece, if you go to do public testimony, that's going to be online. If you go to a protest, there's certainly going to be records of that online and very discoverable. Anything you do with political organizations, charitable groups, a company you work for, that's all discoverable. So what you do, what you say, what your roles are, what you say in their social media, what you say in internal emails, all discoverable potentially. Online reviews, obviously, family, friends, what they say about you is also discoverable. So we had a candidate recently where we had tweets come out from her stepdaughter that were used against her in a campaign. So some of the stuff we can control, some of it we can't control, but when we're doing a campaign, for instance, we even want to look at family members, anything they've said about and why, and if we can, because that, things like that can become stories really quickly. Obviously, government records. Most of those are discoverable, even the ones we think are private, as we see with the old 44,000 records being released last week by Oregon on your vaccine status. So everything is, just assume nothing is private anymore. And that's kind of scary, but that's just the reality we live in. And there's only so much you can do about it. So you have to ask yourself when you're starting this thing, when you're starting, say today, right now, you're saying, I want to control my reputation because I want to do something in life. There's a reason you're asking yourself why your reputation, what you can do about your reputation, because you go, well, everything's online, nothing's private. Why does it matter anymore? Because everybody's committed sins. True, but there are certainly things you can do about it. There's certainly ways to control this. Do it all the time. What you have to start with is, what am I doing here? Where am I going with life? Am I going to be a candidate? Am I going to be an activist? What is my role? What am I trying to accomplish? Am I in line because I want to? I'll go through this in a minute. But am I a troll? If I'm just there to push people around and try to get people to, just to agitate people, fine, that's your role. If I'm there to try to convince people, very different role. If I'm an activist, different role. If I'm a candidate, different role. If I'm an activist looking to be a candidate, very different role. If I'm just a person in business that's looking to be to be honest, when I hire people, and every company I know does this now, we search people's backgrounds and histories before we hire them. So even in your professional life, I do a full background check on everybody to find out what they're saying online to make sure that I'm not hiring somebody as crazy as myself. Probably not a good idea. Anyway, you want to make sure, think of your goals. What am I trying to accomplish? What would I like to see happen? And these are things you have to do consciously. You don't just, the worst thing you can do, what I find when I'm looking back on, especially, I'll use candidates as an example, because pretty much everything I say about candidates can be done on a lesser scale with business. So what I find one of the biggest mistakes is people just stumbling through life without thinking about these kind of things. And even though we're kind of aware of it in the back of our head, we're not consciously thinking about it. I'd say the first recommendation is make it a conscious decision. Sit down and say, who am I? What are my goals? Where am I trying to do with life? Am I going to be, like I said, professional, candidate, activist? What is that? And decide what those roles are. What's your future look like? Because what you do online will absolutely impact your future. So just be extremely aware with it. Pick a lane, even if that lane changes, and be conscious about it. Make a physical, write it down. Here's who I am. This is where I'm going. The goals are important, more now than ever. What's your role? This is what I'm saying. Are you an activist, influencer, a candidate, connector, or are you just one of the cast members in life, right? Your online universe, and this applies mostly to social, but it applies to everything you do. if you're an activist and your role is you've decided that I'm going to be somebody that is going to try to move the dial politically, and you have and that's my role. Understand that that's going to make it very difficult for you to be a candidate. If you're an effective activist, it's going to be difficult to be a candidate in the future, unless you do certain things, unless you're cognizant of that and actually straddle the fence a little bit. But in general, a candidate's role is to be elected, is almost always damaged by an activist past. And quite honestly, it's hard to be an effective activist if you're not going to damage your chance of being a candidate. Me, for example, I would probably never ever be able to be a candidate. I've chosen my activist future, and I will. Everything I have said would absolutely be used against me, and I would never be elected. Most likely, I would have a hard time electing myself, and I'm pretty good at that. So, pick your roles. Let's see. Influencer, what I mean by that is if I'm just trying to move the dial on things, it's not necessarily an activist. If I'm a person that's supporting a candidate campaign or an issue or a charitable organization, that's a different kind of thing. Or if I'm just one of those people that is there just to try to help people along. Connector, different role. Cast is that's the guy stumbling through life. If I really don't care, if I'm self-employed and I really don't care what people think about me and I'm just going to stumble through life, that's fine. If that's your role, don't worry about the reputation. The past. On this one, this is a long discussion, but I'll stick with the candidates because they're probably the easiest one, and we're somewhat political beasts. Going back in history on candidates can be as simple as, depends on what place they're running for, how far you take this. Almost every candidates, I'll do at least the first four on this checklist, if not the fifth. We go through an entire social media history going back to the beginning of time and do all we can. Even if you've deleted tweets, there's programs that will pull up deleted tweets, but you can do what you can do. It's hard to the role is to make it as difficult as possible to find things that somebody else might be able to use against you. And again, that's a lot longer discussion and what would be something, for example, if you're going to say something about a race issue, there's ways to say it that would be 10 years ago, no problem and completely common, and everybody has no issue with it, that obviously today, even 10 years later, heck, 5 years later, would seem extremely offensive to many people and probably not the way to say it today. I think we can all understand those kind of things. So even though something clearly wasn't racist 10 years ago, it would be clearly racist today, just by community standards, whether we like it or not. And I don't, but those are the kind of things we go back and say, in today's context, is that something that is viable? And so we use that kind of measurement to go back in life on social media. We do Google search, everything has been online, and I don't want to get into it too deeply, but there's ways to clean up your reputation on news articles if things have been published. There's ways to bury them. There's ways to get them unpublished. There's ways to get things that counter them. It's a lot more creative. If you find something that's seriously damaging, there's lots of things you can do on that. We have in the past. It's difficult if there's a serious news story from a serious organization to get it hard to find. So once something's published, it's really difficult, but you can have, and that's usually on a lot larger scale campaigns where you have a lot more concerted efforts and things. If it's a known issue, then it is what it is. And you have to work on how you're going to respond to that. Background, online background check. There's lots of companies that do this, and we have several that we've used, and those are just simple. Basically, now you're looking for records and scans of criminal history, any kind of divorces, any kind of public actions for adoptions, and whatever else, right? Bankruptcies, so on. That's where we're just looking for anything, kind of community records of anything you've done that might come up. I used to be shocked. I'm no longer shocked at what I can find on people that I thought I knew. and people that have, even when they're confiding in me privately as a candidate, and they've told me everything, and then we do a background check and we find a bunch of things that are very seriously things that we need to address. Oh yeah, forgot about that. Nah. So yes, it's always important to do these kind of things. Professional background, that is essentially where we will go in and actually hire an investigator. And we've done that several times on people that are serious employees or serious candidates, to say, it's too important. They have too critical of a role. Their background is going to be, we have to find out what the opposition is going to find out, or find out what I'm going to find out later now. So those are the ones where we actually hire somebody to do the full intense background. and we can find out everything. So it does what you did 40 years ago. Good luck. So the past, clean up the past. Make sure once you decided who you're doing, in a general, if you're just an everyday person, just routinely go back and check your social media from 5-10 years ago. Just scan through it. If you're looking for a job somewhere, it's really a good time to do this. If you're thinking about becoming a candidate or an activist for anything, or quite honestly, if you're going to work for a charitable organization, you're going to want to go through these things routinely. It's not something where, yeah, I'm a good person, I never say anything bad. You go back again, take things in context. History is today. It's not 5 years ago. 5 years ago was a different world. And 5 years from now will be different. Today, what we said is going to be considered racist or homophobic 5 years from now. That's life. That's the world we live in. So go back, scan your social media history, check it out. Just say, would I post that today? And be honest with yourself. If not, just delete it. It's going to make it much harder for them to find. I see a lot of people sometimes have emotional connections to old social stuff for some reason. And I get that. It's nostalgic because they come up later on, whatever. But quite honestly, just if I had to choose a world where, I would make everything basically disappear after a year, right? And on social media, I would just go through and delete everything. Quite honestly, it's probably the way to go. But just in routine, I would say a good rule of thumb on this one is, and that's almost something you can't say anymore, right? A good rule is to, if you're going to have a change in your life coming up professionally or politically, or routinely once every year or so, just scan back and say, would I say this again? If the answer is even maybe, just delete it. That's a good rule. Second one, Google search yourself. It's fun. It also tells you how much impact you're having. Just search yourself and look for any news articles, look for any mentions, look for anything that might come up. If you're serious professionally, or if you're a serious candidate, you might want to sign up for an online background check on yourself, because the person that's hiring you or the person that's going to run your campaign will certainly be doing that. Somebody put their hand up. I don't know what that means, Rich. How to do that.
Hi, Greg.
Hey.
I have a question. So in terms of deleting stuff from social media past, what if you make it seen to just yourself, like seen as only yourself, right? Only me can view it.
I'm sorry, I don't quite get the question all the way.
So what happens in that case that you set the viewing of a post to just yourself? Is that the same as deleting, or is that not as effective?
It's certainly not as effective. We can find those. Even deleting them, we can find them. Once you've deleted, there's a lot of programs that will archive all Twitter and Facebook posts that if I'm doing a full background check on you, I can get your deleted posts. Especially if it's private, there's not anything private. If you're really attached to something, that's a halfway point. It makes it, and I'd say most people aren't going to find them unless you're in a serious spot. I wouldn't be able to find a private post of yours or even a deleted post unless I was in a serious candidates race, for instance, or if you're going for a serious job where I would actually hire somebody to do a background check on you. Then I would go back into the archives and say, let's look at your deleted tweets as well, because I can find them, or your personal ones. But I'd say it's a halfway step. Right. Just to be safe, I get rid of them.
Got it. That kind of relates to my second question. So if one is not looking to be a candidate, but say they're in business and they go to speaker events that are politically oriented, maybe they happen to stop by a protest, but they never take pictures, or but somebody may see them on the in the audience. Does that, what is there a category for that? Does it matter? People will associate you with a certain political strain if they see you there, obviously, but you're not being involved. What does that make? How does one prepare for that kind of association, loose association?
I'd say it's a lot bigger question than this. I can give you a few different answers. Look at, and we just went through. We have people that are still there's active campaigns right now against legislators trying to get them to resign for showing up on January 6th, even though they didn't go to the Capitol, they didn't go inside the Capitol, they've never been arrested for anything. And yet there's actually commercials out there being used against them in the campaign saying that they were involved in January 6th, because there's a picture of them at the rally, and even though they did nothing. So it's difficult to say, and of course, I'm an activist, I don't care. I have lost business. I know I risk losing clients. I have had people call my clients and essentially tell them that Greg was here, or did you know he represented these candidates, my commercial clients. And I have lost clients over this. But I've chosen my path. I know that, and I'll lose more clients over the future. It's important enough to me to where that's okay. I'd say most of my clients I've had long-term very clearly understand who I am. I'm proud of who I am. And even when they disagree with me, if they respect that, and I warn them, they might get calls or emails, or, and there, I've actually had one client that stepped away from me, even though he was supporting me, because of the organized opposition. So it does happen, where they started going after him. They started basically going after his business because of a group I was involved in. And it was nonsense, but it didn't matter. And he supported me, but his business was getting hurt. So they had to sever ties. And I understood it. So it's a big question. So and I would say, again, it depends on, and I don't want to let anybody live in fear, because I want to encourage everybody to get out there and protest the heck out of everything and state your piece and stand up and speak loudly and be proud. But everybody has different goals in life. So I understand the need to manage your reputation, because quite honestly, the power that you have later, if it might come at the cost, it might the expense of that of doing something now might limit your power later. So it's a decision you have to make.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a tough call.
Right.
Online background check. Let's see. Professional background. That's the last one I would say. Yeah, we hired that occasionally, and that's one of those ones where you probably don't need to do this on yourself. I have had one done on myself, but it was when I was going for a position at the White House, and it was one of those ones where I want to know what they're going to find on me first, even though theirs is probably a lot more extensive than mine. And wanted to make sure that there was nothing that would come up. So I've had one of these done on myself, and it was actually pretty revealing. A couple things I didn't know that were discoverable. So those are usually, again, reserved for something you usually don't do this on yourself, unless it's a pretty serious spot or you're a candidate in a serious position. They can get quite expensive. The present. It's just like you're talking about. These are every individual decisions. Be conscious of your roles and goals. Just understand who you are, where you're going, what you want to get done. So when you do something, if your role is, I want to change the world, I want to stand up, I want to make a difference, it's going to be a different decision than if you're like, I want to run for office and I want to hold this position and I want to make a change this way. Or I want to be, say, out of politics completely. I want to be in the private world and I want to be a corporate blah, blah, blah. Whatever the role is, just understand the role that your decisions that you make today have serious weight, whether it's fair or not fair, much more today than they ever have. Don't be tempted by emotion. And this is the toughest one. This is your 3 a.m. tweets, right? So don't reply without thinking. And I always say, if there's and I've had this many times, I can tell you, I get advice from others, or I get advice from yourself, in a sense, where I can't tell you how many emails I haven't sent or how many tweets that have not gone out after I've written them. But even be careful on that, because they save those. So don't even write them if you don't want to. But I mean, if you're thinking about it. But I have one of my things I do, because everybody's impulsive to some extent, and I tend to be impulsive and emotional at times, and I have to watch myself. If you went to my Facebook, it's the most boring thing in the world. It's puppy dogs and sunsets, and that's because I have a lot of candidates and clients that cross over in that whole political world. I'm an activist, but I'm an activist not on my Facebook and not my social world. I'm an activist behind the scenes. My power comes from getting things done through groups and organizations and candidates. And I don't want that, especially when I'm handling candidate races as a consultant. I don't want my baggage to hurt my candidate. So my power is limited if I get too much negative on me, even though if you did a history on me, it would be a problem. But the last 10 years, my social experience No way. You're not going to find anything in there that would be significantly harmful to me on any candidate's race, but that's my path. So every time I actually I write down my Facebook posts sometimes if I'm angry or upset or whatever it is, I'll put it on a Word doc before I paste it into a social media post, and I'll let it sit before I post it. And if I come back to it and go, I can't tell you how many times I've said, and don't post it. And it lets me talk and think it out without putting it online and having it live forever. So just be cognizant of that stuff. Saying something just to say something is a human characteristic, and something we all do. But in our world, most of us are in political to some extent. It matters that the end goal is the point that matters. And managing the power to be able to accomplish that goal is something we have to keep in mind. And it's a decision that most everyday people that are not in the political world don't have to think about necessarily. They're just thinking about, well, I get hired for this job, which is important. But in the political world, it's especially important. Your role and how you position yourself and what you place on there is who you are. And I give you a dozen examples just from candidates this year, where something that was an innocent post from 5 years ago that would have been viewed no problem whatsoever, that even though I told them to delete it, they didn't delete it, came back and haunted us because the argument was up saying that, well, that's not racist, homophobic, blah, blah, blah at all. And you go, well, in today's standards, it is. And we just have to be cognizant of those kind of things because it limits our ability to get the job done. And there's ways to do things that will get the job done that are just as effective without removing your ability and your power. That's where I'm going with it. The future. Something I do is I set up Google alerts on myself. And by the way, I do it all the candidates and all the opposition, anybody I'm working on. It's the simplest thing in the world. You go into Google, search Google alerts, set up an alert if you don't know how to do it. Very simple. Any number of categories. It'll tell you anything that hits involving your name, your organizations you're involved with, the candidates you're working with, the company you're working for, the charitable organization you're working for, or if you're running against somebody, their organizations and their charitable organizations. Set it up. If anything hits the news at all or is published online, usually Google will pick it up and it will give you an alert saying that word came up in the news. Use it. It saved me. If nothing else, it gets you the first one to know about something. If you got somebody that's say, and I've had this instance happen where I've had an opposition candidate get arrested for something and it wasn't public, but the arrest report came up on Google, but no news organization picked it up. So I get an alert going, hold on a second, our opponent's been arrested for something. And we were the ones that broke the news. We had to call the news organizations and say, hey guys, you didn't realize this. So it does help. It's a simple tool. Revisit your goals and roles over time. This is something, like I was telling you at the very beginning, just to kind of get towards wrapping this up. But who we are today is not who we are a decade ago, 2 decades, or 3 decades ago. Everybody, if you look back, and if you're the same person you were 10 years ago, then you're not human, or you're just really somebody that really knows who they were at a young age. I certainly didn't, but it's revisit that from time to time. If you were the person going if you were the activist in the 2000 to 2010 area, and now you're trying to change and say, hey, I want to go towards being that candidate, or I'm going to the corporate world, or if you did a lot of stuff in college and now you're going towards this, clean it up. Make sure you revisit your roles, go back, clean things up a little bit. Decide who you are for the next 5 years. Decide where you're going with things. Try to and revisit those goals once every year or two. Let's go in there and say, am I still that person? And it's amazing how many times that little simple tool will come back and go, no, I'm not that person anymore. Or at least I've changed courses in life. And if anybody's gone to college, you'll know what I'm talking about because you change your degree 3 or 4 times, at least. I can't tell you how many people are third-year college students that still don't know what their degree is. So that's okay. Revisit your goals. Do the same thing with your online reputation. Stay current on what's discoverable. This changes all the time. 2 years ago, there's no way I could have found, 3 years ago, I couldn't have found anything about your deleted tweets. Now I can. There's tools to do that without hiring some forensic kind of stuff. Now it's pretty simple. There's tools to do it. government records that were very private now are hacked routinely. Things that were not, there's lots of examples of this, things that you couldn't find a few years ago, it just changes all the time. So just be aware of what's publicly consumable now that wasn't before. What up? Hands up. Is that you, V?
Yeah, it looks like Vika's got another question. Go
Yeah,
ahead
that's what I'm
and
saying.
unmute yourself. Vika, unmute yourself.
I recognized that voice.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
I'm wondering, is there any lawsuit against that ability to dig into deleted tweets? Because that seems like an invasion of privacy.
You would think, but no. Not that I know of. It's because you publicly, essentially it's a published document. And the only person that owns your tweets is Twitter. So the only person that would be able to, and once it's published online, it's a public document in a sense. I don't know if there's any legal challenge onto that currently, but I don't know how they could. Because you've already it's like a news article. You can go back and delete the article, but what you said, if somebody took a screenshot of it, it's infamous, it's immortal.
Right. All right, 1984, hello.
It's true. Yeah. No, it'd be 1984 if they went back and changed that story and then the published article was used today. And you go, I didn't say that. Yeah, they changed the actual history. So
that's next.
Yes. I mean, the
Next
racist,
episode.
I don't mind that we can find racist comments from Biden from 1980s and 90s, or heck, from 5 years ago or 2 years ago, that are very, very bold. It's good to know that somebody, because those kind of things are, they are who you are. So it's interesting. I don't like I can't, there's parts of it I like, 99% of it I hate. The world I grew up in as a kid, which several of us on this list probably did as well, similar age to me, we didn't have to worry about this, and it was much easier. We could do a lot of things and grow up as normal human beings in a world that forgave you and understood that you were kids. And your past didn't necessarily come back to haunt you in so many ways. And people understood that people evolved and changed and became different people over time. And that was normal. Today, you're not forgiven for that. Your 3 a.m. slip up when you're 18 will haunt you when you're 50. Yeah. That's just the reality of the world. So, and I would say most of the time, if you delete tweets, if you delete Facebook, if you go back and you're just relatively, if you don't get arrested for anything serious, most of the stuff's not going to haunt you in life, because people, quite honestly, most people I hire, they have a history, and almost everybody does. And I'll find things there's nobody that's clean, none. And if quite honestly, if they're too clean, then I worry. But there's nobody that's clean. So you have to put everything's relative, because there's so much on everybody now that you go, yeah, you got arrested for DUI when you were 23 years old. I get it. If you got arrested for 6 DUIs, then I'd say, So you think everything's relative. So do what you can do.
Interesting.
Any questions, anybody? I think I went through like I said, just surface level stuff. I think the sum up of this is really just to be conscious of your reputation. I think everybody understands that, but sometimes they don't think about it. And it has to be a conscious effort. Make a list. Who are you? Where are you going? And manage your reputation accordingly. And do the best with what you've got. Now, on the opposition side, I'm going to use anything and everything you've ever said against you. So it goes both ways. So that's it for me, Rich.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see anything coming up in the future as to where this is heading, this amount of being able to dig into your past? Do you see us taking on programs like social credit score or anything else that is like this is all heading towards?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's interesting. I'll give you my opinion on it because it could go any which direction. It could be a pushback, significant pushback against us. But I think where we are now is we are really close to that social score. I think we're already there to some extent because again, if I hire you, your social credit score is 100% impacted in everything I do. Not many people realize this, but stocks and stock investments are already valued by your social scores, the social score of the companies. So the stock market itself is pushed around and invested in by the social score of the company. So it's already active in our communities. It's already active in our capitalist structure. And now we see this with COVID and everything. We're taking steps towards that direction. I can't imagine that it won't. The push is not going to continue to do that. I do think we're going to get a significant pushback at some point when people start to, but is it too late because we've already opened up Pandora's box, right? How do you put back that genie in the bottle? Another bad metaphor. Once it's already out and cast its spell. So unless we destroy the machine that allows us to do this to each other, I don't know how it goes backwards besides accepting what it is and trying to realize where we can push back and where we can't. And I think the loss of privacy has been probably the biggest destruction to our democracy, our republican.
It's interesting.
Republic.
Some time ago, a number of years ago, I had a bill introduced into the Oregon legislature, which would amend the Constitution. Of course, it would have had to be referred to the people, but it would establish an explicit right to privacy, which was lifted from the Montana state constitution. And interesting, it came under attack by both the left and the right.
Of course.
A lot of people signed on to it initially from both major parties, but then they pulled their names off of it as they learned various ramifications of the bill, that it wouldn't allow the interests that support them to do things that they're able to do.
Exactly. It comes down to power in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think that if we're going to do anything like establish a specific right of privacy, it's going to have to come from the ballot measure.
I agree with you.
Initiative process.
I'll give you a good example, Rich. I remember one, and I actually criticized for this one when I came. I lived in Denmark for a year, and somewhat progressive country at the time, but they're still very capitalist, right? But one of the most interesting kind of eye-opening laws they had there, and I came to actually respect and appreciate it, was that your criminal history, once you've been released from your sentence is over, is non-discoverable. It is gone. You can ask about it. Because their whole point is, if we're rehabbing you and you've served your time in the community, that's the point of it. You don't have a life sentence for rehab. And so they're like, if we either succeeded at rehabbing you or we didn't, but your punishment is through the time of your punishment, not after. So the criminal history was absolutely, that's the first time I ever saw that in person. And it actually worked very, 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 very well. The idea of even that level, you're like, should we know about a criminal background? You're going, no. Anyway, yeah. I think that's even a slippery slope.
Are there any more questions for Greg today or comments?
Yeah, this is Glenn. I've got a question. You mentioned the social media image relative to stocks, bonds, maybe, but the ESG, is that what you're referring to?
I believe it's called, there's several terms it's called by, and I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but I believe you're right that that's one of the terminologies they use on that. And there's a lot of the brokerage firms now that, especially so much of the stock is traded by basically bot, right? It's auto trading. And so much of the platforms are set up by social scoring. In other words, because they put this in as the argument from the capitalist side is that if somebody is not environmentally friendly to a certain level, they're more vulnerable to protests or boycotts or potentially having a scandal with lawsuits or so on. So their reasoning behind it is that you have to be socially, their vulnerability to their stock is why they're doing this. But obviously this has been an agenda pushed very strongly to say that your social score, they actually grade you by social score on the companies. And that is very much factored into risk management for investments.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing, the way you just described it. Environmental, if a company is considered dirty, how do they remediate,
Yeah.
and so forth and so on. But what that comes down to is filtering out people that are doing legitimate business.
Of course.
And even beyond all of the governmental regulations, they are being pressured into this global warming and
Yep. You can see where it goes.
yeah,
Certainly, it's a temptation. They set the structure up to be irresistible to investments. They made it so investment companies can't ignore it.
yeah. So it comes
It's
down
extortion.
and it comes down to basically peer pressure from a really small group of people.
Yeah, it's extortion.
And yet I can't get the financial guy to appreciate that.
Nope.
And he is a kind of a conservative guy. What I'm saying is it's so ingrained into the financial world, you know, and so if you offer a stock and they go back into your history, like you say, you may or may not be able to achieve
100%.
any value.
I remember this first started out. I mean, Oregon was one of the first ones to do this. They had the state treasurer was the first person to start, one of the first ones to start doing this. And I was kind of alarming at the time. And now it's all 50. It's a given, which is they were, I remember in an interview very specifically, this was in the 90s sometime, where they were asked about why they weren't investing in certain companies. And his answer was that he's investing for the maximum social return for the state, not the maximum monetary return. And they're using taxpayer dollars for the most social return. And that was the initial conversation that really started getting people thinking, you know, that a lot of the state treasurers were doing that at the time. And it's a very leftist agenda by every definition, because you would think you'd go for maximum. But then they excuse it, of course, by saying that we're getting rid of corrupt corporate greed, blah, blah. Then again, it's that whole idea of hate speech. What's hate speech? What's corporate greed? It's whatever they define it as. And it's evolved into this thing now where it's ingrained in saying it's a risk management factor. So you're right. It's something now, it's so systemic that I don't think most companies realize that the pressure put on these organizations is ingrained so heavily in the investments that they're almost not allowed to. But people talk about, well, why don't they stand up to the social causes? And they go, they can't, because they will kill their ESG, it'll kill their social scores, it'll kill their investments, and they have a responsibility to their investors, they have stockbrokers. You get the idea. It's a big circle, and it's an extortion game that has succeeded.
So we've evolved well beyond being able to recover from any of this.
100%. Yeah, good luck on that one, right? Yeah, and it's not people. And I'd say 99% of people probably wouldn't even know the ESG or anything about that, but it is something that very clearly is our social scoring that's involved in Wall Street.
So we've become the CCP Politburo anyway.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Glenn.
Nothing better than confirmation.
I'm with you, man. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Anything else today from anyone? Okay, seeing that, I'd like to thank all of you for participating today, and also thank Greg for his expertise. And I invite you to take part in our next session, which will be 1 o'clock on Saturday. Details to be announced. Watch your email, and thank you very much for participating today. Take care.
I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.